Well, thank you very much, Steph, and good morning, everyone. It's great to see you all here this morning. Theme for my talk this morning is going to be optimism, which might seem like a strange theme in the times in which we're living, but I hope you'll bear with me. I have by now accumulated many years of work experience, and nearly all of it has been in education, and the vast majority of it in further and adult education. I've been a teacher, I've been a development worker, a manager, a CEO, and both an executive and a non-executive board member. It's a CV that many of you will share or have similar versions of. And in all these roles, I've tended to refer to myself as a professional optimist. I've always believed that as a teacher, it's my job to help people to understand and to really believe that they can learn. I think, like everyone here, that education is a force for good. It's a route to self-improvement, and it's a route to a more rewarding life. At its simplest, education is simply about improving lives. And improvement, I have no doubt, is helped by a positive and an optimistic approach. And as an educator, therefore, I feel I have a professional duty to be an optimist. And about 20 years ago, I came across the work of Professor Martin Seligman. Some of you may know his original work was a book called Learned Optimism. And he's had much subsequent research and writing on well-being and positive psychology. He's a great believer that well-being requires building on the positive, that just trying to eliminate or reduce the factors that have a negative impact on well-being is not enough. And he links this positive attitude and approach with optimism and the more negative with pessimism. And he is very clear that education has a really crucial role to play through building more positive thinking and attitudes. So you can see, I think, why I admire him. And when you read Professor Seligman's descriptions of the characteristics of optimism and pessimism, it's very easy to recognize and to relate these to people as they're trying to learn. He describes the three key traits of pessimism as the three Ps. So pessimists tend to think that failure or misfortune is permanent, it's pervasive, and it's personal. So, for example, if you're trying to learn maths and you've just failed your GCSE, the pessimist's belief is that this is permanent and it will persist. I can't do maths, I'll never be able to do it. A pessimist may also believe it's pervasive, that the failure or misfortune applies to more than just this one event or this one aspect of life. So I'm no good at any maths, not really much good at most subjects. And they may also believe it's personal, by which Seligman means they will internalize the cause of the failure, blame themselves when bad things happen. It's me, I'm just stupid. An optimist, on the other hand, takes a more positive attitude. They don't believe it's permanent. I was having a bad day, but if I work a bit harder, then I think I can pass. They may attribute the failure to the specific rather than believing it's pervasive. So I'm less good at geometry. It was that let me down. And they're much less likely to personalize the cause. It's my geometry teacher, he wasn't very good and he didn't explain things properly. So, of course, what I've just described is a very simplified summary of a much more nuanced body of work. And most of us, of course, are somewhere along the spectrum of optimism and pessimism in relation to all three of those characteristics and how they combine in any situation. And where we are on this spectrum will affect all aspects of our lives. But the consequences of habitually resorting to the pessimistic view that misfortune is permanent, pervasive, and personal is that it creates a deep sense of helplessness, that failure and misfortune afflict you and there's nothing you can do to change it. Actually, Seligman himself says he's more naturally inclined towards pessimism, and he constantly tries to learn and indeed to teach others how to develop a more positive and optimistic attitude and approach. And what I'm talking about is not advocating blind optimism. We all certainly need a good dose of realism, and it's important for us to accept responsibility for our actions and their consequences. At its extreme, blind optimism is just delusion, just as extreme pessimism is despair. And very clearly, there are times when it's much easier to be optimistic. So at the moment, I think I am suffering the disappointment that is an almost inevitable consequence of being an optimist. I think things in further education are most definitely as tough as I have ever known throughout my career. And government reluctance or inability to tackle the core issue is deeply, deeply disappointing. In fact, it's short-sighted, it's ignorant, and it makes me very angry. But as the National Institute of Economic and Social Research noted in their recent report on UK productivity, the standout problem is the continuing skills issues. And particularly, and I quote, the underinvestment in vocational education and training. Now, I would assert it's actually the underinvestment in post-16 education and training that's the real issue, and unless this core fault line is repaired, we will never secure the economic and social progress that our country needs. As a true optimist, however, I am genuinely positive. I really, really do not believe that the current neglect of our sector is permanent or pervasive, and most certainly it is not personal. Firstly, it simply cannot be permanent. Government secretaries of state and chancellors are never permanent, far from it. But more importantly than the individual decision makers, the world in which we're living is changing faster than ever. And this accelerating pace of change, the advent of new technologies, changes in global trade, in economies, in demography and skill profiles mean that the continued neglect of skills is going to very quickly create a crisis that puts the UK further behind other countries. Brexit is only going to exacerbate that situation. So our government may be being slow to respond, but the need for urgent action is becoming ever more apparent. And neither is the current state of affairs pervasive. We have, I think, very clear evidence of the growing understanding and acceptance of how serious the current underinvestment is and the impact that it's having. Not just the report I quoted earlier, but as you're all very well aware, the Institute of Fiscal Studies, the Chief Inspector, the FE Commissioner, the Children's Commissioner are just some of those who've highlighted the seriousness and the risks of the current position. We have a growing consensus on the need for improved investment in colleges to secure the pipeline of skills that business needs and, critically, to support a more inclusive economy. And certainly the neglect that we are experiencing from Treasury is not personal. It's not our fault that governments have neglected FE. We may not be perfect. Mistakes are made. Sometimes our judgments are wrong. We know there's always room for improvement. We are educators, after all. But we also know what our strengths are. We know that we are the sector that fuels the economy with the skills it needs. We are the sector, as we saw very clearly last night, that others fail to reach. Colleges sitting at the heart of their communities, changing lives, making a real difference. We're also the sector that is constantly adapting and responding to changing needs, dealing with the follies and the failures and the neglect of governments, rising to the challenges, continuing always to support our learners and to keep their needs at the fore. Everyone at this conference understands the importance of the work that we do. We understand the impact of this work on the lives of individuals, on our local businesses, and on our communities. We know that what we do matters. We know that we get it right far more often than we make mistakes. Those of you at last night's awards dinners saw very clear evidence of that. Brilliant, inspirational stories from students and fantastic example of the work in colleges that shows how innovative we are and the real impact that we have. The Beacon Award colleges shining a light on the impressive range of activities that colleges across the country do day in and day out. We heard about initiatives in technical education, in mental health and well-being, work with employers, international work, on social mobility and widening participation, on careers and guidance. These are all the things that are of critical importance to people's lives and to our nation's success and well-being. We heard about great staff and great leaders in our colleges. This is the reality. This is the day-to-day truth that sadly doesn't make the headlines in the press. My optimism, therefore, is not blind. It's founded on my true and deep belief in colleges, on the evidence I see every day of just how precious the work we do is. There is no doubt, I think, that just like the maths teacher who couldn't teach geometry to our student, the Chancellor got it very badly wrong when he failed to invest in further education. But his mistake in last month's budget will not define our sector and its future. Government has the chance to put things right, and we have the chance to help them. We must now make sure that Treasury truly understands the importance of our work to improved productivity and a successful economy. Just feeling optimistic is not enough. It takes action to effect change. We are, every one of us, used to getting on with the job of making lives better in our own colleges, and I have absolutely no doubt that we will continue to do that. But if we are going to avert the dire consequences of the continuing neglect, we must act urgently, we must act vigorously, persistently, and above all, I think we must act collectively to educate government and others of the critical importance of our work and the consequences of failing to support it. And your association wants to work with all of you on this shared endeavour. We are not helpless. What we choose to do and choose not to do matters. Our college mission statements vary, but at their heart, they have a common purpose and a common cause, and it's that mission and that cause which has kept us resilient, and it will continue to do so. So, despite this being my final conference as chair of our association, my optimism will make sure that I continue to work on every campaign we have and use every opportunity I can to promote the college sector. It has been my greatest honour to be a part of it and to work with colleges. And we can all play our part. We need to stay positive, to open eyes and minds that are closed. And above all, colleagues, I urge you, we must be optimistic about our ability to really make things better and to continue to improve lives. Thank you.